Welcome to Hard Talk, I'm Sean Lay. Rivers State is at the heart of Nigeria's oil industry. Oil produces 20% of the country's wealth, yet more than $1 billion a month is being lost to thieves who siphon it off from remote pipelines. Even Nigeria's government says some is a creative response by people who remain desperately poor. Rotimi Amaechi is governor of Rivers State, a key figure in addressing the problems. But he's locked in a highly public dispute with the president. Their supporters have had to be separated by the police, and the power struggle has prevented the state assembly from meeting since May. Isn't it time he focused on the day job? Rotimi Amaechi, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you very much, Sean.
The second largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, growth of more than 5% every year for the last 8 years. So why do you think so many international investors now seem to be questioning whether they want to invest in your country?
Well, the excuse they have given, or the reason they have given for that position they're taking, is basically because of the insecurity in Nigeria. And if you looked at the world economy, where you have oil production, there's huge insecurity.
There's huge insecurity, certainly in lots of places. You're quite right about that. But to quote Duncan Clark, who's head of oil exports at Global Pacific and Partners, he says Nigeria has multiple problems in its oil game, failed to meet reserve growth and production targets for many years. Whilst the competition is growing, it really hasn't made enough progress. And although high crude prices have clearly helped to protect it, that's unlikely to last forever.
Exactly, it will not. It certainly not last forever.
So what's the country doing about it?
But what I think the country is doing about it is that they have to address the social policing, what are part of social policing, the insecurity aspect. And insecurity here is basically a product of poverty. And I think that what the government needs to do, including my government at the state, is to address poverty. And to address poverty, you have to look at education, you have to look at industrialization. And industrialization can only come when you have power. So when you deal with the issue of education and power, and then you deal with the issue of health, then you can have people that are employable. And once people are employed, then the question of insecurity will be reduced. It's
strange to think that that should still be the case when Nigeria has so much money it's getting from the oil industry. What's happened to it all?
The assumption is that we have so much money. We have more problems than the money can address. We certainly have more problems.
But the money doesn't seem to be addressing very many of them at all at the moment.
Well, I think right now the issues are being addressed. We're looking at the last time we had I was able to attend the National Economic Council meeting. We had agreed to address education in the north, and the governors have voluntarily agreed to submit 2% of their resources for the growth of education in the north. So that's a basic way to show that we're addressing it. We're looking at globally the picture of knowing that it is not good for the southerners to be educated and our northern brothers are not. So we're prepared to participate.
That's clearly a good thing, but I mean, this is a country where, according to the World Bank, poverty reduction and job creation have not kept pace, implying social distress for an increasing number of Nigerians. It's not even as if the problem has been standing still. It actually appears to be accelerating. What, 68% of Nigerians living below the poverty line? I'm sure you must be wondering why I'm laughing. The reason why I'm laughing is that at this point in time, Nigerian government as a whole, whether at the state or the federal level, have accepted the fact that one way to address it is agriculture. The oil industry has never addressed the issue of unemployment. What the Nigerian government is looking at now, and that includes the River State government, is to look at agriculture. Agriculture will then address the uneducated class. And once you do that, and those people are taken care of, then you can address the skilled manpower. The unskilled manpower will be the basic people that will be addressed by agriculture. So we're divesting into a second tier of the Nigerian economy, which has to do with food production. Isn't the problem that with that, though, all of which will take time, and it may be admirable in itself, that meanwhile the oil industry itself is having grave doubts about Nigeria's future as an oil producer. You have major companies like Shell deciding that whilst they disinvest from some of their commitments in Nigeria, they're investing instead in places like Ghana. You have figures that show that whereas in 2005 more than 20 exploratory wells were drilled in Nigeria, in 2011 it was just 3. There's a sense that gradually the focus is shifting away from Nigeria, and Nigeria is not doing much to stop that.
No, that's not because of insecurity. That's basically because of the petroleum industry bill. The moment that is addressed, if the investment will come back to Nigeria. It is not just because of insecurity, then Shell is investing. They want to know the rule or the law by which they are investing, and that is what the National Assembly is addressing.
And that'll be the petroleum industry bill, which they've been talking about, what now, for 5 years?
Yeah, but right now, the National Assembly, both the Senate and the House of Reps, are addressing it now. We hope that before the end of the year or early next year, it should be passed into law. Once it's passed,
although the oil minister says it probably won't come into force for another 5 years after that.
Well, I wouldn't know that. But once the law is passed and signed, the law becomes effective.
Well, not according to Dizani Alison Madueke, the oil minister, who was quoted last week by Reuters saying it'll be another 5 years.
She's not a member of the National Assembly. She's the Minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and that's the executive arm of government. The moment
they're the ones who actually have to implement.
No, they don't have a choice. The moment a law is passed and it is assented to by the president, it takes effect from that day.
Better late than never, I suppose. Duncan Clark has described Nigeria as the proverbial land of no tomorrow. I mean, again, you yourself acknowledge it, these continuing uncertainties. Isn't it the job of a governor like you, who is in charge of a state where the oil industry is so vital to your economic performance and your future, to be lobbying and banging people's heads together and saying, look, this bill shouldn't have been sitting around for 5 years, the period you've been governor. It should actually have been signed and got into force?
No, we've been able to talk with members of the National Assembly severally on the need for them to pass this bill into law. And believe me, they are very patriotic and they know that the bill has to be passed into law. But there are areas, grey areas of disagreement that they have to look at. They have to look at the powers of the minister. So I remember somebody asking me a question 2 days ago. They said, America is oil producing, just like Britain.
Yes, and demand from America is dropping fast, isn't it?
Yeah, but the point is...
A third of your exports went to America just 2 years ago. Last year, you were exporting to them the lowest amount you've managed in 20 years. At this rate, they won't be taking much for much longer.
But there'll be others who will take. Energy is energy. There'll be others who will take. I'm not worried about the market. My worry is...
You're not worried about the market?
No, when I say I'm not worried, I'm saying, yes, I may be alarmed by the fact that Americans are no longer buying a lot of our oils. But there'll be others who will also want to buy. There'll be people in Asia, and that includes China. But what one is saying is that when the person asks that question about America produces oil, they have no minister for petroleum. So if you look at the PIB, what you are saying is that the powers of the minister should either be reduced, or in fact there's no need to have a minister for oil. We think that they should privatize the oil industry so that people can do their business and get on with their business and pay the government the resources they need to pay.
Motoyo Sunmonu, who's the head of Shell Nigeria, you may know him, was quoted back in February as saying there's a finite money available to be invested. The competitive landscape has changed. Nigeria cannot afford to miss the boat. It's not just a question of saying, well, when we get these things sorted out, the companies will start reinvesting again. Yeah. By then, other countries will have appeared.
Exactly. But you see, you have to know one thing. The moment you have put the law in place, it gives confidence first, before you begin to deal with the issue of insecurity and all that. People invest in Iraq. Iraq is not as, Nigeria is not as bad. So they will invest, but you need to know the rules by which you're investing. And then, like I told you, once you have that law in place and you deal with the issue of insecurity, and I've told that they only deal with the issue of insecurity if you're able to deal with the issue of social justice.
What about then the question of oil theft? The federal government is estimating it's costing Nigeria about something over $1 billion a month. This process of bunkering, siphoning off the oil from the pipelines in some remote parts of the Niger region. What's being done about that?
Oil bunkering in Nigeria can be categorized into two. There is one done by well, you may refer to them as criminals, but they are criminals to the extent that they are poor. But they're addressing poverty from that perspective. And the Nigerian government must address poverty. Because if you address poverty, those young ones who just go and break pipes and steal oil and all that.
So you'd agree with Kingsley Kuko, the President's special advisor on Niger Delta affairs, who was quoted this month as saying, I think it's actually quite creative. We just have to find a way of turning this creative response to poverty into something positive.
No, I don't agree with him in that line. I agree with him that it is poverty. But I believe that Nigeria should address poverty. If you create an opportunity for these people to be able to deal with their income, and then at that point, they will leave out the oil wells, they will leave out the oil pipeline. But there is the other by the elites who actually come with vessels and go straight and take this oil. The federal government needs to deal with that, because those are the people who actually cause too much damage.
Down to you as well, isn't it, as governor of your state? You have to deal with this as well.
No. Oil in the constitution is the responsibility of the federal government. We're like commanders-in-chief without troops. So when it comes to such federal establishment, federal issues, it's less for the federal government. If they want us to assist, then they have to give us the necessary tools by which we...
you need the resources in order to do it.
It may not necessarily be money. It has to be with the fact that you have to have police, you have to have those security institutions that have to assist you, and we currently don't have that.
We've talked a bit about the problems of poverty, and you've alluded to their importance in addressing them, in trying to alter some of the difficulty Nigeria is facing. The petroleum industry bill at least will attempt to make some contribution, talking about 10% of the net profits from the industry going into communities living in the oil fields. But it's true, isn't it, that already quite considerable sums of money come from the industry back to states like yours. There's the derivation from the money at the moment, I think it's put at about 13%. There's the cost of the amnesty programme that was established in 2009, supposed to help 30,000 people, give them an income of $400 a month. And there are all the other funds that are diverted back into the state. Why is it that people in your state, many of them, are still so poor?
The problem is that these programs are not integrated. They are actually, everybody is on his own, doing things that are not linked to each other, both the state government and at the federal level.
So you're not working together?
That's the point. If you get NDDC and you get the amnesty program and everybody involved to do common things, then you see that people don't need to repeat what you have done. There are situations where you go to communities, the federal government or NDDC must have done water, the state government also may have done water there, and then you have the local government also do water there. No. I think that once they are integrated, once they can work together, then you divert what you don't need to do in the community to other communities. That's one. Again, is that there must be stakeholder engagement. You don't come from Port Harcourt and tell somebody from Bonny, for instance, what you want him to have. You go to Bonny and say, what do you want? Once you have stakeholders engagement, you know what the problems are and how to address the problems. It's not a one solution that fits all. Do
you support the amnesty? Because it's due to expire in 2015.
I've never supported the amnesty.
At all?
No, I've never. The country knows that.
So what's the alternative?
No, my position about the amnesty is, I've always believed that when criminals commit crime, they should be prosecuted. Now, at the time President Yar'Adua introduced amnesty, I had opposed it, and my position was that, look, you punish criminals, and then if you don't punish criminals, you'll be rewarding criminals. If you reward criminals, then you have others in the different regions asking for amnesty. Right now, you are aware that others are asking for the same amnesty.
Yeah, but the other politicians will say to you, actually, it brought down the violence. It dealt with some of the criminality. It took people out of the gangs. And that's one of the reasons that your state has been safer than it was. I mean, Port Harcourt used to have a reputation, didn't it, for being sort of kidnap capital of Nigeria.
Before the amnesty was introduced, we had reduced crime tremendously because we had put in place what we call both social policing and physical policing.
So nothing to do with the amnesty?
No. And I wouldn't say nothing to do with amnesty at all. Amnesty had its own contribution, but we had gone ahead to ensure that we enforce law and order. What we were saying was, instead of amnesty, please enforce law and order. Once you curb impunity, criminals will know that they can't commit crime. See,
it ought to be that your citizens, with all those efforts you're talking about, with the effect of the amnesty, whatever you may think of it, ought to be some of the best off in Nigeria, and yet read you what the Vanguard newspaper has said. It said, funds have been grossly abused and diverted by governments, and the majority of citizens in the region are as poor as the poorest peasant from Jigawa state in the north, which you would know is a pretty poor part of Nigeria. Communities tends to become a small circle of elites. The people at the top, the people in positions like yours, have not ensured that the money has been spread amongst the rest of the population.
I wish you had visited Rivers State recently. You will see how much we are applying the resources that we have at the 13%.
But do you dispute that point?
No. I don't think anybody disputes that point when it comes to Rivers State.
You accept that? You accept that's what happened?
You mean what Vanguard is saying? Well, there is that abject poverty. in the Niger Delta area. There is the point that not all the poor people in the Niger Delta are benefiting from amnesty. That's why we say if it's a social welfare program, then let's run it as a social welfare program and run it across the country so that the poor would then benefit. But this is not sustainable. What is sustainable is something that introduces employment, that introduces income earning. And amnesty, yes, they've trained some pilots, they've been able to do some of this, but it's not broad enough to cover the majority of those who are poor in Niger Delta.
See, in some ways, I suppose your part of the country, the Niger Delta region, which includes river states, but obviously other states as well, is not so bad. It's not the part of the country where there is a real, what one might call almost an existential crisis. That's happening in the north. With the activities of groups like Boko Haram, for example, and the attempts to create tensions between Christians and Muslims, the killings of Christians by some of the extremist groups and so on. Perhaps what Nigeria needs in 2015 is actually a northern president.
No, don't. That would be ethnicizing the presidency. Nigeria needs a visionary leader, not to ethnicize the presidency.
But somebody who actually comes from a region who understands
you don't need to come from the north to understand what the Nigerian problems are.
Well, they could have a vice president from the south, maybe Rotimi
No, I don't think so.
Maybe you could be the vice president.
Don't bring in 2015 politics now.
Well, it's not that far away.
Yeah, but then you need to govern because the mandate is for 4 years and the 4 years expires in 2015.
Well, I'm interested you say you need to govern because a lot of people would say at the moment that's not what you're doing. You're engaged in a fight with the president, a very, very high-profile, very public dispute with President Goodluck Jonathan, and that has become your focus.
No, that's my focus. My focus has been majorly on development. We have disagreements. We have disagreement on policies. This is a transition period. We have disagreement on the issue of transition. There are a lot of assumptions being made here and there by different persons about what they think or what they assume my ambitions are. And,
well, what are they? Clear it up. Let us know.
No, I don't have to.
No, you don't. You don't have to say anything, but wouldn't it be helpful?
How?
Well, because this is becoming a big distraction, isn't it?
You see, what you must know is that I believe in the rule of law. Let's even assume for purposes of argument that an ambition exists. Nobody has a right to begin to bring down a state just because an ambition exists. But first and foremost, it is important to state clearly that everybody should allow 2015 for 2015 is a bit too early. The president is elected to preside over the state as the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, for which he's been elected. And I support that. And I want everybody to allow Mr. President to preside over the country for the interest of the country.
Trouble is,
in the same way,
just a few days ago, you were accusing the president of not being interested in democracy, or at least some of those at federal government level, you said, but in impunity and authoritarianism. The people around him, that is. The president needs to check this.
I didn't say the president.
No, you didn't. You said the people around.
I said the people around the president.
Yeah,
there are people who are abusing power, and there are those who have even compromised power. And so when the Financial Times reporter interviewed me in Port Harcourt, I did make that clearly. That was the day some hoodlums were hired to stone some northern governors who visited me to show solidarity.
Yes, this was at the airport, wasn't it? Where they come to show their solidarity because you'd been elected to chair the State Governors Forum.
Exactly.
Even though you'd run against the fact that the advice of the President, who after all is the most senior politician in what was your party, the People's Democratic Party.
Nobody advised me not to run.
You weren't told not to run?
Nobody told me not to run.
It's been widely reported that you were, so that's not true.
Nobody told me not to run. I challenge anybody.
Did you tell him you were going to run?
No, there's no law that requires me to tell him I was going to run.
Isn't it a courtesy? He is the elected president of the country.
No. See, don't forget that just like you are a journalist, I guess you are, because you can't be...
Well, allegedly, yes.
I like that. Now, my assumption is that maybe you belong to, if the journalists in Britain have an association, you may belong to the association. Would the Prime Minister tell you to run or not to run for any public office? That is the freedom we're looking for in the Nigerian Governors Forum. So I didn't need to have to go to the President to say, Mr. President, I want to run for the office of the Chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum. I didn't need to do that, and I didn't do that. And he, in turn, did not call me to say, don't run, I heard you're going to run. So I ran, and I didn't see the president on the ballot. The person I saw on the ballot was Jonah Jang. And to all...
And you say you beat him? You say you won 19 to 16?
I didn't say I beat him. The result was clear.
Okay.
That 19 governors voted for me.
He objected? He objected?
No, he didn't object to the fact that I won. He didn't object to the fact that I won.
Okay, but he's now in dispute. It now seems to have got caught up in this dispute between you and the president. You've been suspended, we're told, for unconnected reasons from the People's Democratic Party. A man who you would know, because I think you were he was quite close to you at one point, Nyesom Wike, one of the education ministers, says you should stop your public attacks on the president and leave the party. He says, I've started fasting that he should leave the PDP. Let him leave the PDP. Let him leave now.
You know, he doesn't have a right to tell me where to belong to, whether I want to belong to PDP or not. So
I think it's a polite invitation, or maybe not that.
He doesn't have that right. So
you're not going?
I'm going nowhere. I'm going nowhere. We'll all be in PDP. And
presumably because you're not going, because if he did, your chances of then getting the vice presidency or any other office would go out the window. The PDP dominates Nigerian politics. You're not in it. You're nowhere.
You're making a lot of assumptions too. Let's assume that I remain in PDP and I remain in PDP. Let's assume from your own assumption too that I'm running for the office of the vice president. Would my leaving PDP not enhance that assumption? Because don't forget, the president wants to run, it's assumed that the president wants to run in PDP. And if the president wants to run in PDP and I remain in PDP, then it means that I have no ambition. Or those who are assuming that I have an ambition may be making a lot of mistakes, because the place to be able to pursue that ambition will be an alternative party. But the reason for remaining in PDP is because nobody can chase me out of PDP. I'm a member of PDP and I love to be a member of PDP. And
even if it costs you your higher ambitions?
What ambition is that?
Well, you've just speculated on the possibility of running for the vice president.
No, I did not. I said we must allow 2015 to remain for 2015. Nobody can now state whether you want to be president or you don't want to be president.
Meanwhile, this is all causing a lot of problems in your state, isn't it? As I said, in the introduction to this programme, the Assembly hasn't been able to meet. There was an attempt by some politicians to impeach the Speaker. They were opponents of yours. There was then this incident where a couple of weeks ago 30 buses turned up filled with young men, some of them Good Luck Jonathan supporters, some of them saying they were supporters of yours. That's not spontaneous, is it? You don't get 30 buses full of young people turning up in one place at one time.
I doubt if my supporters were there. I doubt if my supporters were there. I didn't see anybody. The point that remains is that, you know, you're getting close to transition, and politics is one of the greatest things in Nigeria, and a lot of those whose interests appear to be threatened have come up now to pursue their very private interests. And as governor of Rivers State, my focus is not on that. My focus is to pursue the goals in which I've been elected.
Very hard to do that, though, isn't it, when all of this is going on, when the police have had to ban demonstrations in Port Harcourt because of disputes, when those governors who came to support you put out a statement saying that they think the police are being abused and abused. We're shocked at the role of the police. We do not see the need for state governments to fund an antagonistic police force. Do you agree with them? Were the police implicated in this attack?
I agree with them that the police is not neutral in this matter, and there is need for the police to be neutral. The Commissioner of Police in Rivers State needs to know that first and foremost is in the police command of Rivers State and needs to protect the Rivers people. He needs to join me to protect the interests of the Rivers people. That I agree with the governors. But don't forget, I continue to say that what you're having is a political disagreement, and people are using barometer to look at what's going to happen. The problem is political disagreements have consequences. Let me put you what the World Bank said in its economic report. In a sense, it takes us back to where we started, the threat to investment. It said the significant degree of autonomy of Nigerian states can be potentially advantageous, but this process is now hindered by too little market connectivity, weak coordination in fiscal policy, and problems in governance. The politics is harming the economy, and the economy, because of the problems it faces, means that the people are suffering. Exactly. I agree that people are suffering. We must, as a people, as a government, those of us who are in government, realize that the people's interests must be paramount. We must first look at the fact that we need to address poverty, we need to address power, we need to address the...
And we includes you.
Of course, you can't be chairman of Governors Forum and not be a high player in that regard. So when I talk about government, I'm including my government, which I serve as the governor, and my colleagues who are members of cabinet. But you know, in Nigeria, people pursue a lot of private interests, and there's little or nothing I can do about that. But for me, as governor, the interest of the people, for me, is extremely paramount.
Rotimi Amaechi, Governor of Rivers State, thanks very much for joining us on Hard Talk.
Sean, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Very good to speak to you.
Hello there. Warnings are out for some very severe rainfall across western parts of India. I'll come back to that later. For the moment, we'll concentrate on Africa, where a lot of the showers are centred through the equatorial belt, but they're drifting their way into western Africa, perhaps up into western Sahel in the coming few days, and they could cause some issues locally. As we head further southwards towards Cape Town, it's 15